There's something about driving a BMW that just brings an absolute smile to my face. Today we're looking at the fully electric iX1. It's very much based on the X1, although it does come in at a much steeper price tag. In the UK and at the time of filming, it starts from £53,000, that is for the X-Line trim. If however you go for the M Sport model, it will cost you upwards of £56,000. So is it actually worth its price tag, and does it compete in the fully electric SUV market? Let's find out. So to kick things off, let's talk about what defines a BMW. I'm going to hazard a guess it's something to do with driver's input, driver's feel, something that's actually quite fun to drive and brings a smile to your face. Well, that's exactly what the BMW iX1 does for me. Because in comparison to a lot of its competitors, or pretty much all of its competitors, I think the iX1 pretty much stands in a league of its own. Now the BMW iX3, its large assembling, did also give me that sort of sensation as well. However, it is slightly larger and therefore does suffer from a bit of body roll. This being slightly smaller just feels a bit more nimble and just a bit more planted down to the ground. Now you've also got an all-wheel drive system that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range, and you've got the M Sport suspension. Now the suspension system is adaptive, which is great, although it's no competition with the likes of the Citroën EC4 or EC4X, or for example the larger Audi Q8 or SQ8 e-tron. And that's because these vehicles really do soak up a lot of the anomalies and speed bumps when pottering around town. However, the BMW iX1 gives you that sense of feel, but you can also feel the road that's under you, which has got its pros and cons, because the cons is when you're just pottering around town, you don't really want to feel everything. You don't want to be kind of seesawing around speed bumps and potholes and anomalies. You just want to kind of be gliding over them. Well, you don't quite get that on the iX1. You really do feel that it's kind of that stiffened suspension feel. Now, aside from that, it is also worth highlighting that this vehicle has got fantastic brakes. Yet again, something that couldn't be said across the range, specifically when it comes to all electric vehicles. So for example, right now, if I just come to a standstill, I just feel the vehicle just really does brake really well. And you might come to expect that with a vehicle that has M badges planted all over it and it's called a BMW, but it's just good to know and have that reassurance that this vehicle has got great stopping power. So aside from this, what about when it comes to performance? Well, here you've got two electric motors, therefore an all-wheel drive configuration, outputting 233 kilowatts or 313 horsepower. This also gives you a whopping 494 Newton meters of torque. Now, it's worth considering this is only when you have boost mode. Now, boost mode is effectively initiated by using the left side flappy paddle, and indeed it is basically a means of giving you some extra power at any given point. If you're going to be doing a launch, this is automatically enabled as well. Now, via Race Logic's Performance Box Touch, I had it tested from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.42 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 2.13 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 4.96 seconds, and that's actually quite below the manufacturer's claim to 0 to 62 miles an hour in 5.6 seconds, and then 50 to 70 miles an hour in just 2.55 seconds. Yes, indeed, it is very electric to drive. As for top speed, it is rated at 112 miles an hour. So what about when it comes to its electric range? Well, here, as standard across the trim range, at least at the time of filming and in the UK, you've got a 64.7 kilowatt hour battery pack with a heat pump. These come fitted as standard, so it's great to see. Now, the manufacturer claims that you'll get between 259 miles to 270 miles, at least on the combined WLTP test cycle. Now, for my own mixed driving test, I netted between 225 to 240 miles, which is actually not too far off the manufacturer's claim, and ironically is pretty much bang on with what I got when I tested the BMW iX3. Now, in comparison to how it compares to some of its competitors, it actually sits on the relatively higher scale. And that is, of course, if you're looking at an all-wheel drive vehicle, because some of the other vehicles that I've tested are rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, and therefore don't make for a real fair comparison. Ultimately, over here, the BMW iX1 is neither the best nor the worst, but it certainly should suffice for most consumers, specifically given the overall electric range that it offers. Now, in order to be as efficient as possible and to recoup energy back into the battery pack, you might want to enable a degree of regenerative braking. Now, of course, this is done when you press down on the physical brake pedal, but it can be done automatically when you lift off the accelerator pedal. Now, right now I'm in D mode, and via the infotainment system, I'd previously selected the strong deceleration. So right now, if I lift off the accelerator pedal, I'll decelerate pretty heavily, but I'll still be rolling. If I want to come to a complete standstill, I want to flick down on the gear selector to go into B mode, and now I do indeed have a full one pedal drive. Now, it's great to see that the one pedal drive can be easily initiated, but it's a shame that it's not retained like you'd find, for example, on offerings from the likes of Volvo or Tesla. Equally, it's a bit cumbersome that if you do want to flick between the different regenerative braking modes in auto, you'll have to go through the infotainment system. There are no flappy paddles or settings that you can easily access. It just seems a little bit silly that the manufacturer hasn't thought about incorporating this. Nonetheless, you'll probably want to select it and then forget it, and then of course enable B mode if and where you see fit. Now, apart from recouping energy while on the move, you can of course come to a standstill and plug it in. And here via CCS port, it takes up to 130 kilowatts of input, and therefore means that you can go from 10 to 80% in a mere 29 minutes. Now, via its Type 2 port, you have also got the ability of recouping energy at up to 11 kilowatts because of its onboard charger, and therefore you can go from 0 to 100% in 6.5 hours. This time can be brought down via an optional £880 22 kilowatt onboard charger, and therefore will come down to only 3 hours and 45 minutes. Now, if you do not have access to a 3-phase power supply, you can plug it in via a regular wall box. And here, from 0 to 100%, it'll take you 9 hours and 45 minutes. Opt for a regular 3-pin socket, it'll take you a whopping 32 hours and 15 minutes. So moving swiftly on, how is it to be actually sat within the iX1? Well, first off, I do have to commend the manufacturer for good soundproofing, because cabin noise has actually been kept down to a minimum. So much so it's actually one of the lowest figures that I've recorded to date. If you want a detailed breakdown of this, do check out my detailed audio review that can be found up on your pop-up banner, down the description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now, this does actually bring me onto its audio system. And first off, you'll probably want to disable the iconic sounds. These give you some sort of whooshing sounds when you're in certain modes, but I just don't really see the point in them. Of course, you can toggle it on and off via the infotainment system. But here, when it comes to the actual audio system itself, you've got 6 speakers that come fitted as standard. 12 if you go for the £660 Harman Kardon system. Now, in my opinion, the latter is certainly worth the upgrade because it really does bolster the overall sound frequency range. Again, more information on my detailed audio review. Now, as for the use of technology, you've got a 10.7-inch display. It's very vivid and very responsive. However, I do feel it's not as intuitively laid out as some of its competitors. For example, from the Hyundai Motor Group or indeed Tesla. It just seems like you have to faff around with certain settings. On that note, it doesn't actually have dedicated climate controls, and therefore if you're going to be adjusting any sort of climate while you're on the move, you're just going to have to touch around certain buttons, and that does actually take away some of its safety credentials. And yes, before you say anything, there are no physical controls. Other than a few basic media controls found towards the center console, you've not actually got the iDrive selector either, like you'd find, for example, on the larger iX3. Some food for thought for those people who do prefer a sort of more practical design. On the flip side, however, I absolutely love the fact that the infotainment system supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay over a wired and wireless connection. And better still, these third-party mobile operating systems feed through data straight to the instrument cluster, so much so that you can even see Google Maps directly on it. Not the same that could be said about the vast majority of its competitors. Now, the 10.25-inch display is also very customizable and allows you to flick through different modes. As for the head-up display, it features as part of the Technology Plus pack and comes in at £1,205 in the M Sport trim and £2,890 within the X line trim. Indeed, the head-up display is locked behind a pack, but of course if you do want this, then you will find that it does display all the key driving information and furthermore feeds through navigation data from these third-party mobile operating systems and the built-in nav system. Now, speaking about your options, if you want a wireless smartphone charger, you're going to have to opt for one of those packs. And that is, of course, if you go for the entry-level X-Line trim. Thankfully, it comes fitted as standard in the M Sport trim. Now, this does actually bring me onto storage within the cabin. And here at the front, you've got 2 cup holders. These reside next to two USB Type-C ports which provide charge and allow you to connect up to the infotainment system, and a 12-volt socket which can be handy for plugging in a dash cam. There is a further two USB Type-C ports found at the rear of the cabin, although these are solely used for providing charge to your rear occupants. Now, as for the glove box, it has actually been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles and therefore is pretty sizable. And on that note here, you've actually got quite a large area underneath the overarching center console, therefore allowing you to place a small to medium-sized purse or wallet. However, the small little compartment found within the armrest is actually very narrow and very shallow. Therefore, will only be good for placing, let's say, a set of keys, or for example, the wireless key fob, or for example, a set of charging cables. Of course, for your smartphone, not for the vehicle itself. Now, as for the door bins, they're pretty large at the front, although it's a shame that they've not been lined with any sort of fabric, and therefore means that loose change and any sort of keys will be heard rattling about. And as for the rear, they're unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. Thankfully, there are two cup holders which are found in the pull-down armrest compartments. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot. And here you've got 490 litres to play around with, and if you drop down the seats, you've got 1,495 litres, making it actually pretty practical, although not as sizable as some of its competitors, for example, the Tesla Model Y Skoda Enyaq iV, or for example, the larger Audi e-tron. Nonetheless, it should suffice for most individuals, and furthermore it's actually very practical to utilise, because you've got this hatchback design with an electric tailgate that comes fitted as standard with hands-free operation. Better still, you've got a completely flat loading bay with 40-20-40 rear split folding seats, although they're a little bit faff to drop down each time because you have to go to the second row and pull on these small little levers. Nonetheless, you've got a large underfloor compartment which is very good for storing your charging cables, and you've got these small little side compartments which can be handy for taking smaller sized goods. Although it is worth noting there is no front compartment, and furthermore the removable boot load cover cannot actually be stored in the underfloor compartment, therefore meaning that you'll have to leave it at home or indeed take it with you when you're dropping down the seats. So moving on from storage, what about when it comes to seating comfort? Well, first off, I would like to point out that those little levers that you can activate to drop down the seats also do serve a purpose for your rear occupants. In other words, they can have that reclining sort of feature, so it makes it a little bit more comfortable or customizable, although I still would have liked a means of dropping down the seats from the boot, but anyway, I digress. Now, when it comes to the seats themselves, they're actually soft and accommodating both at the rear and the front of the cabin. As for the back of the cabin, I should point out that legroom is actually a non-issue. As someone who's just under 6 foot, I've got no problems. Although it should be pointed out over here that the seats are slightly diagonally wedged, like very much a lot of its competitors, and therefore means that it can be a little bit tiring on your quad muscles. Similarly over here, the rear footwell design has not been optimized. Given it is a fully electric vehicle, it would have been great to see it completely flat, or for example, the rear portion of the center console actually not sticking out all that much. Alas, that's not the case, so it's just something you should consider, specifically if you have 3 people who are sat at the rear of the cabin quite often. Now, when it comes to headroom, however, I've got absolutely no complaints. It's actually quite surprising that this relatively compact SUV provides plenty of space. Indeed, in this respect, as a reminder, I am just under 6 foot and I don't feel hemmed in the slightest. Now, at the front of the cabin, it's a non-issue, of course, because the seats themselves are adjustable and also heated as standard. Speaking of which, over here, if you do want to have fully electronic controls and an active driver's seat, you might want to go for the Comfort Pack, which comes in at £1,105. This also does bring a heated steering wheel. If you only want the active front driver seat, you will want to opt for a separate option, and that comes in at £250, so therefore saving a little bit of money, of course, if you do want that feature. Now, aside from this, I would just like to point out that the overall design of the cabin is absolutely fantastic, and this goes hand in hand with the overall comfort. Indeed, over here you've got a different material on the X-Line trim, and you've got an Alcantara as pictured in the M Sport trim. You can also go for a leather upholstery for £1,150. Frankly, over here I've got no complaints, and it goes toe-to-toe with some of its main competitors, for example the likes of Mercedes-Benz and Audi. Now, as for the panoramic glass roof, it's optional and comes in at £1,100, although it does bring a lot of additional light, and you've also got a retractable electronic sunshade. Now, on that note, it's absolutely great to see that you've got these large cutouts found towards the C-pillars, and it just makes the cabin feel a little bit more airy and open, and indeed does draw in some extra light. So kudos where it's due. However, it is worth pointing out that the rear privacy glass does not come fitted as standard. And equally, the rear windows don't fully drop down, and therefore means that your rear occupants can't fully appreciate the scenery that they're being driven around in. Now, aside from all of this, I would just like to point out something that I've never highlighted before in any of my reviews, and that's to do with closing the doors. I know it seems quite trivial and it might not come across properly on my camera, but here, when I was sat within the cabin, or of course when I step outside and close the door, I feel that the noise the doors portray is a bit too accentuated and sharp on my ears. Now, I'd be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below, but here's a short little clip of it. Now, moving past a few of these quirks, let's talk about its exterior design. Now, I really love its aggressive stance, at least in comparison to its larger sibling, the iX3. And indeed, that is because of how its headlights are shaped and how the bonnet feeds through to it. However, it is worth considering here that you have got a slightly oversized grille, like you'd find on very much of the modern vehicles from the BMW group. I've never really been fond of it, and I prefer the slightly thinner grille look, but of course that is quite subjective. Here, the grille itself is available in a gloss black or chrome finish, and is completely closed off given the fact it is an electric vehicle. And yes, as you might note, there's some blue elements around to it, and this can also be found at the rear of the vehicle, and this is to instigate that it is a fully electric vehicle. As far as I'm aware, these cannot be actually removed. Now, as for the side profile, I really like the fact that the door handles are concealed and built into the door frame, therefore giving it a little bit of that extra bit of flush feel to it and also improving aerodynamics. And you've also got 18-inch alloys that come fitted as standard on the X-Line and 19-inch alloys on the M Sport. Of course, you can go for 19-inch alloys on the X-Line or even 20-inch alloys on both trims, although this will cost an additional extra. Now, as for the rear of the vehicle, it's got that sporty flair to it, in part thanks to the fact you've got the built-in spoiler, and you've also got these really nice L-shaped tail lights and a diffuser. Now, past that, when it comes to the overall colour options, it comes as standard in white or black, depending on which trim level you go for, and then you've got metallic finishes to choose from, which range from £595 up to £950. If, however, you really want to stand out, you might want to go for the pictured frozen pure grey. It comes in at a whopping £2,100, but it really does look the part. Now, aside from all of this, the iX1 has got a towing capacity that's rated at 1,200 kilograms, which isn't too shabby but can't quite compete with some of its competitors. However, you have got some extra capacity at the top of the vehicle thanks to the built-in roof rails. So moving on from its exterior design, let's talk about crash safety. And here, the BMW iX1 at the time of filming has not been tested by Euro NCAP. However, its petrol and diesel variant, the X1, has and was awarded the full 5 out of 5 stars, so make of it what you will. Now, as standard in the fully electric model, you've got a few driver assistance systems, and here you've got attention assistant, ovation aid, front collision warning, speed limit info, cruise control with speed limiter, and lane departure warning. Now, the latter is actually quite annoying because it is enabled every single time you turn on the vehicle, and furthermore, in order for you to disable it, you'll have to faff around with the infotainment system. The same could be said, for example, with the drive modes, which for some reason when you do select them don't actually automatically deselect. In other words, don't go back to the same screen that you were on, and therefore means that you'll have to do an extra step, for example, if you want to go back to your navigation data. Now, nonetheless, I digress. If you do want to up the ante, you might want to go for the Driving Assistant Professional, which comes in at a £1,650 option. Now, this brings adaptive cruise control, auto speed assist, lane departure and change warning, steering and lane control assistant, exit warning, cross traffic, and also rear collision warning. All of which are certainly appreciated, although it's slightly a shame not to see some of these included as standard. Now, as for parking, the BMW iX1 is actually very easy to maneuver, and here you have got parking assistant that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range. Better still, you've got fantastic visibility at the front, side and rear, and here you've got a rear view wiper, a rear view camera and front and rear parking sensors. Should you want 360-degree cameras and also Parking Assistance Plus with also a drive recorder, which can be useful in the unlikely event of an accident, you'll have to go for the Tech Plus plaque. This will cost £1,205 in the M Sport trim and £2,890 in the X-Line trim. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict. Now, the BMW iX1 isn't quite perfect. It hasn't been built from the ground up as a fully electric vehicle and therefore doesn't have the efficiency as some of its competitors, namely from the likes of the Volkswagen Group or indeed Tesla. Then you have got a lack of physical control within the cabin and therefore makes it less intuitive to use than other vehicles from the Hyundai Motor Group. However, if you want something that's really fun to drive, has got plenty of punch to it thanks to its 2 electric motors, has got a decent electric range with all things considered, very stylish inside and out, and also quite practical with its rear boot space, then the iX1 surely should be at the top of your list. As a result of this, it gets our Best Buy award. Now, we'd be curious to know what you make of the vehicle down in the comment section below, and of course how you feel it fares in comparison to its main competitors, some of which we reviewed and will be down in the description below for your own consideration. Now, if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which will be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.